All right, welcome to the Fantasy Fanatics Podcast. I'm your host once again, James, and I'm joined once again by Nate. What's up, man?
So,
Just for this week's podcast, we'll be covering the tight end awards for fantasy football this past season. We'll be taking a look at some NBA and NHL pickups as usual, as well as some previews and just general talk from each of the leagues. But before we do that, I just want to get your sort of reaction on the Carson Wentz trade that took place. The terms of the trade is the Eagles are trading Carson Wentz to the Indianapolis Colts in exchange for a 2021 third round pick and a conditional 2022 second rounder. The 2022 conditional second rounder will become a first round draft pick if Wentz plays at least 75% of the snaps in the 2021 season or 70% and the Colts make the playoffs. So if none of those take place, that remains a second round pick. But if those do take place, it becomes a first round draft selection. So I just want to get your thoughts on the whole Carson Wentz deal, whether they gave too much or it was a good trade, and just sort of the fit of Carson Wentz in the Indianapolis offense.
um, I think it was a good trade, I guess, all around. I know Carson Wentz, he still did pretty good this season. I know he this year was kind of a disappointing year for the Eagles, and they've decided to kind of move on from Carson Wentz. But I think the probability of Carson Wentz performing really high, I'd say it's a pretty good chance that he's gonna bounce back this season. So I think that uh, the picks that they got should be pretty good to kind of, I guess, not necessarily rebuild, but I guess like retool, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that
Um,
does make sense.
yeah, and I think that it's really good for the Colts as well because they only needed like just a quarter. They just needed a good quarterback to make a deep playoff run. I think we were talking about this before, but like they they almost beat the Bills. It was really close in the playoffs. It was only like a field goal away from getting into overtime. And now that they kind of upgraded their quarterback, they should be able to be in a position to kind of make a deep run this year, or I guess the coming season.
Yeah, I think just in general, this benefits both the Colts and Carson Wentz. Um, like you said, you believe that they gave up the right amount to get Carson Wentz. I think I believe the same thing. I think when it originally came out that they wanted two first rounders for Wentz, I think it might have just been to sort of just push the price a little bit higher. They probably knew they weren't going to get two first rounders, as we could see from this trade, but you know how the team's just trying to push for as much as they can get, kind of thing. But yeah, I think it's sort of it looks like a low risk move for the Colts, reuniting Carson Wentz with his former offensive coordinator, who's now the head coach of the Colts, in Frank Reich. I think that those two developed a good relationship with each other, both on and off the field. So I think it would be very beneficial for a guy like Carson Wentz, just being able to, just be around that coach again. He sort of brought out the best out of Carson Wentz, and I'm hoping that we could sort of just see that come out from Wentz again. And just a stat I was looking at, actually, Carson Wentz this year was sacked 50 times, and like, as we know, that was probably the most that any quarterback was sacked this season. And then if you take a look at the Colts, they only gave up 19 sacks on the whole year. Wentz was sacked 50 times in however many weeks he played, whether it was 12 or 13, whatever the number was. But yeah, 19 on the whole year for the Colts. He's going to get good protection there. I think that could bring out some of the talent that he had shown, the MVP level season he had, and the couple of playoff appearances he also had with the Eagles besides that season. So And then just in terms of fantasy, you're right. He didn't have a bad year. He was close to He was just outside QB1 ranking. I think the first 10 or 11 weeks of the season. So he was producing decently. I know it fell off a little bit as you know the whole thing happened with Jalen Hurts, but I think that Carson Wentz can be sort of a sneaky pickup. Maybe not your first quarterback, but maybe you want to get him as your sort of second quarterback with a bit of upside when you draft, and then he might get sneaky first round value next year. Any other thoughts on this Wentz trade?
I think that I know he did throw a lot of picks this season, but I'm not expecting him to throw the same amount next season. So I think
Oh yeah,
that
for sure.
if you have like if you had any wide receivers or tight ends or like running backs who are on the Colts, I think that their production should be able to increase as well because Carson Wentz is still a very talented quarterback, and with the Colts line, they're going to be able to kind of protect him enough so that he doesn't have to rush his passes or make mistakes. So yeah, I think it's going to be good for just like all the Colts players, not just Carson Wentz as well.
Another thing that's good about him is he can roll out of the pocket and he can make plays on his feet, which is something that a lot of quarterbacks need to do in today's NFL. So I think, Philip Rivers, that was sort of his limitation when he was in Indianapolis. I know Frank Reich is very used to coaching Carson Wentz. So I believe that it'll sort of bring out the better side of Carson Wentz on the field. And I guess his relationship with Frank Reich off the field, both as a coach and sharing the same faith, that will really help Carson Wentz's mindset. I know people were saying that his mind wasn't in the right place this year. So it just seems like I know I've heard interviews from other Colts players, how Frank Reich just wants to, be sort of like a brother to each guy off the field. So I think that relationship is there between him and Carson Wentz, and I think that's going to be beneficial for this coming season. And yeah, I fully expect. I know I just took a look that Carson Wentz was the 14th ranked fantasy quarterback around between the week 9 to 11 mark. So that was around where his play sort of fell off. So he was close to a QB1 in fantasy. Definitely with that rushing floor that he has, being able to make plays on his feet. And then the rushing touchdown upside. I know he definitely went for a lot of rushing touchdowns the last few years. So um, if he's a threat on his feet again, then teams will have to respect that. And I think that he will be able to generate touchdowns both through the air and on the ground. So, yeah, I think this team is a good fit for Carson Wentz. And I think just as a whole, Indianapolis, their ceiling, I believe, is higher than it was with Philip Rivers. In terms of a team floor, we don't know how Wentz is going to perform next year. So it's hard to say where the floor of the team is. I think the floor of the team is borderline playoff. They're very talented, and then their ceiling, like I said, we don't know whether it's a deep playoff run, whether it's a Super Bowl run. We don't know. We will have to see how Carson Wentz fits in.
It's going to be hard to see just like the ceiling of teams in the AFC in general because of just how deep it is. There's like a lot of good teams there. So we're going to have to kind of see when the season comes.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with that. Just moving on now, we'll get to the tight end awards. First, let me just say that tight ends, there were a lot of injuries. Not a lot of tight ends really played to their potential this year. So the awards are going to be a little thin this year, and a lot of the same tight ends are going to be taking away awards. But let's go through them now. Let me get to you first, Nate. The most consistent tight end of the year. Who's your winner and your runner-up?
Well, the winner for consistent tight end of the year would be Travis Kelsey, and the runner-up would be Darren Waller. Travis Kelsey had an amazing year for tight ends, and like you said, this was like a really tough year for tight ends this season. Most tight ends they haven't been getting enough targets, or sometimes they got the targets, but they were just dropping passes for some reason, and a lot of players, they weren't fully in game shape until later in the season, so they had to kind of warm up. So it was just a really tough year. But Travis Kelsey, he was still able to get 17.4 fantasy points per game, which is really good for a tight end this year. And Darren Waller got 13.5 fantasy points per game, which is again really good. Kelsey had 11 touchdowns and Waller had 9. And Kelsey only had 3 games under double digits, and he had 9 games where he had over 19 points. And Waller only had 5 games under double digits, and he had 4 games that's 19 points or higher. So that's for, I guess, a season where a lot of tight ends, there were, you could expect like maybe 9 points at the most, 10 points at the most. That's a really, that's, those are really good stats.
Yeah, just looking at the tight end landscape this year, it was pretty much a mixed bag. Like in terms of average, like when you get to your sort of top 12 tight ends, like your averages that really start to thin out. Like the 12th ranked tight end only averaged about 8 points on the year. So it was very thin at the tight end position. You only had four guys averaging over 10 fantasy points per game in half PPR formats. The guys being Travis Kelsey, Darren Waller, George Kittle, and Mark Andrews, who were, in a sense, 4 out of the top 5 guys drafted. So I guess the premier draft slots for the tight ends are very important. You know, the top 5 or 6. Usually those are the guys you're going to see finishing out in the top 5. Sometimes you might see an outsider come in. We'll mention some guys, but usually it's those guys right near the top of draft boards. Speaking of George Kittle, I'm actually going to get to the injury tight end of the year, and I'm going to give it to George Kittle. He only played 7 games on the year, but those games that he played, he averaged 13 fantasy points per game. He had 2 touchdowns on the year. He had over 600 receiving yards, and he had over 40 catches. So he really made the most out of those 7 games. He was out with multiple injuries on the year. He had a knee injury earlier in the year, and then he also suffered a foot injury, which is what really took him out for most of the season. I believe he missed at least 6 weeks for that foot injury. Maybe less, maybe more. It was around a 6-week time period, I believe, and it really hurt fantasy owners, especially ones that reach for Kittle maybe in the late first round, early second. That's around where he was going in some half PPR leagues. So yeah, it was just an overall rough year for Kittle and the 49ers team in general. But when he was on the field, he was definitely a good point producer. And the runner-up, I'm going to give it to CJ Uzoma from the Cincinnati Bengals. He only played 2 games on the year. He averaged 9.4 fantasy points per game, which is fantastic in half-point PPR. He also had a touchdown. I believe that second game he had the touchdown, but then he tore his Achilles and he was out for the rest of the season, which was a shame because him and Joe Burrow were sort of getting that connection. I noticed after the second game, and then when he tore that Achilles, it really hurt the team. And then, of course, we know Joe Burrow also went out with an injury, which really hurt the Bengals. I believe the Bengals will be a much stronger team heading into next season, assuming everyone on that offense is healthy. Let me just send it right back to you. In terms of the waiver wire tight end of the year, who do you have for your winner and your runner-up?
I'd say the winner for tight end, waiver wire tight end of the year would be Robert Tonyan, and the runner up would be Logan Thomas. Robert Tonyan had 9.5 fantasy points per game with 11 touchdowns, and Logan Thomas had 8.6 fantasy points per game with 6 touchdowns. And as you said, like most tight ends, like the most that you could get was like 8 or 9 or like maybe 10. And these guys, they got like exactly the most that you could expect out of tight ends this year. So especially off the waiver wire, if you got these 2 guys, you probably had like a really deep tight end core on your roster. And both of these guys, I think for most of the season they were 10% owned.
I think
Um,
draft season, I believe.
Draft season, yeah.
Yeah, so I think what qualifies a waiver wire tight end is to be under 50% owned after drafts. So I believe both the guys that you mentioned were under 50% owned. I think you said under 10% owned.
Yeah.
So that's really, yeah, that's a pure waiver wire tight end then for both of them.
Yeah, for sure. Like if you guys were like paying attention to these people and you got them early because you knew they were gonna kind of put in work, then congratulations. That was a really good pick. Um Robert Tanyan had a really high reception rate, even though he didn't get a lot of targets. He had over 5 targets only once this season, but his reception rate was over 70%.
Oh
So
wow.
he made the most out of what he got, and he was still able to get 9.5 fantasy points per game. So that's really impressive for a tight end. And I think Logan Thomas, he had a lower reception rate, but he had more targets. He had over 5 targets a game, and he had higher highs. Usually, with higher volume, that gives you a better opportunity to kind of have some good highlight games. His highlight game of the season was versus Pittsburgh, Week 13. He had 20.30 points, 98 yards, 1 touchdown, 9 targets, and he caught all his targets. So very good game. And Tanyan's highlight game was versus the Chicago Bears, and he had 15.20 points, 44 yards, 1 touchdown, 5 targets, and he caught all his targets too. So both are really good tight ends off the waiver. If you had them last year and you're in a keeper league, make sure you hold on to them. I would say because these guys make the most out of their position.
All right, that sounds good for waiver wire tight ends of the year. I'm gonna just jump into the rookie tight ends of the year. There weren't really a lot of guys. I know most of the breakout tight ends for this year were sort of guys that weren't rookies, but they were more second fiddle on teams like a Robert Tanyan and a Logan Thomas, guys like that. But in terms of pure rookies, for my rookie tight end of the year, I'm gonna give it to Harrison Bryant of the Cleveland Browns. I know Nate, you're familiar with him and how he plays. He really had a breakout this year because of the injuries during the year to Austin Hooper and David Njoku. So he was forced into a role where he a lot of times had to pass catch, even though he was mostly known for blocking. For fantasy this year, he averaged 4.2 fantasy points per game, and he had 3 touchdowns on the year. So not too bad for a rookie season. He was the best out of all of the rookie tight ends this year. And then going to my runner-up, I'm going to give it to Cole Kmet from the Chicago Bears. He sort of came on more at the end of the season. They were giving him a lot more snaps than they were giving to Jimmy Graham. I know that some teams were, having to guard both him and Jimmy Graham in the end zone. So I know he was a bit of a tight end pickup near the end of the year. But yeah, he averaged 3 fantasy points per game and he had 2 touchdowns on the year. So not too bad. If they decide to move on from Jimmy Graham this year, then it looks like Komet might grow in his role as the tight end for the Chicago Bears. So it's just good to see, these young tight ends rise up, and hopefully next year we get more of a big rookie tight end. I know Kyle Pitts is really hyped up from college as a tight end coming in. If he lands on a team where he's going to be the starter, he might end up being one of the rookie tight ends to look out for next season. And let me just get back to you, Nate, on the playoff tight end of the year. Who did you have winning and the runner up?
Well, for the playoff tight ends of the year, for the fantasy playoffs, I would say that Travis Kelsey, he is the playoff tight end of the year, and Darren Waller is the runner-up again. Again, these two were really solid this year, and especially during the fantasy playoffs. Travis Kelsey had 20.6 fantasy points per game, and Darren Waller had 16.7 fantasy points per game. So that's again very, very good for a tight end. These are like numbers you would expect from your like running back or something, but it's tight ends who got it. And yeah, Kelsey got over 18 points every game. He got one touchdown every game he played, and he had over 50 reception yards every game. I think he only played 3 out of the 4 playoff games. His highlight game was versus Miami, where he had 23.60 points, 136 yards, one touchdown, and his reception rate was 80%. So, again, that was a very solid game. And Waller's highlight game um, was versus the Los Angeles Chargers, where he got 25.50 points, 150 yards, one touchdown, and his reception rate was 75%. Waller also had really solid fantasy playoffs with over 20 points for 2 games, and he had over 100 reception yards for, I think, 3 out of the 4 playoff games. So, congratulations to both tight ends.
Yeah, well, it looks like everyone was lighting up the LA Chargers last year. We saw the Patriots game where they won 45-0, lighting up the Chargers. So I think everyone was lighting up the Chargers. They'll definitely have a lot of their defensive players healthy this year. They'll probably look like a better team. But speaking of Darren Waller, for the tight end of the year, he is my runner up. As you mentioned, 13.5 fantasy points per game in half point PPR, 9 touchdowns. He played really well this year. Darren Waller, I owned him in some leagues. A league that I actually won, he was my tight end. So he was fantastic this year. Overall, he had over 1,000 receiving yards, over 100 receptions on the year. Insane for Darren Waller. But I have to give tight end of the year to Travis Kelce of the Kansas City Chiefs. He's just been fantastic. He was pretty much the first tight end off the board in drafts this year, unless some people had decided to take George Kittle. Kelsey also played really well. And like you mentioned, 17.4 fantasy points per game, 11 touchdowns, and he just had a solid year. I believe you said he played 3 out of the 4 games because the last week they did rest him, week 17. So we
Yeah.
normally only count weeks 14 to 16 for the fantasy playoffs, anyways. But yeah, he had 1,400 receiving yards, insane. He also had over 100 receptions, which was also very good, and he had 11 touchdowns, which is fantastic numbers. Him and Robert Tanyan tied for the tight end lead for touchdowns. So yeah, a fantastic year from Travis Kelce, and he is the fantasy tight end of the year. And just one more question about tight ends. In terms of next year, do you see the tight end landscape growing, or do you see it more thinning out to the top end guys?
Um, I think it's kind of hard to say, but I think tentatively, I think people should kind of expect a bit more of the same, like just what we got this season. We should kind of expect that next season. You should also keep in mind that tight ends are generally one of uh, the positions that are kind of, it's hard to draft good players in general. And then with what happened with the whole COVID situation, it made everything even worse. So I think for the time being, we should kind of expect the tight end position to be thinning out a bit until that we see that it's doing better.
Yeah, I think I can agree with you. Hopefully, some of the top tight ends remain healthy. And hopefully, the free agents definitely go to teams where they can be utilized so that we can have a better overall tight end landscape. But we'll definitely have to take a look as the off season progresses and sort of what we can project for next season. But yeah, I agree that we definitely should expect a pretty good overall year for tight ends next year. Whether it's the same, whether it's a bit better, a bit worse, we'll have to find out. But um, and uh, and that's about it for our tight ends rankings and sort of just our outlook and awards on the season. And now we'll move into the NBA portion of the Fantasy Fanatics podcast. All right, welcome to the basketball portion of the Fantasy Fanatics podcast. I'm your host once again, James, and I'm joined again by Nate. What's up, man?
So
Well, big win for your Raptors Tuesday night. We'll definitely get to that as we take a look at some of the standings, but we'll just start as always with some pickups. I'll give a few pickups and then I'll pass it right along to you. And for my pickups, I want to start with Marcus Morris, and he's just been fantastic lately. He's only 42% owned in Yahoo League, so hop on him as soon as you can. In his last 3 games, he's averaged over 25 points. He's been dropping around 6 rebounds per game. He's been adding assists, steals, and blocks, and a low turnover rate with perfect free throw and about zero point 0.6 field goal. So he's been insane. He's been a monster for the Clippers. Only 42% rostered. He's a must pick up right now. And then just moving along to Dylan Brooks from the Memphis Grizzlies. He only 48% owned in Yahoo leagues. He's just been playing really well. He's averaged close to 20 points per game in his last 5, I'd say. Um, yeah, around 20 points per game or so, and he's been averaging around 2 rebounds, 2 assists. He's not hurting you in any percentages. His turnover rate is I mean, it might be a little problematic. He's been averaging 2 to 3 turnovers per game, but if that's not a major issue category for you, I guess Dylan Brooks is definitely someone that's just putting up amazing stats. He's been averaging almost 2 steals a game as well, so he's been fantastic as of late. And then just hopping over to the Portland Trail Blazers, we're looking at Carmelo Anthony. He's also around 45% owned. He should be available in most Yahoo leagues. He's just been putting up good numbers as well. Averaging almost 20 points a game, about 4 rebounds per game, averaging around 3 assists in his last 3 games, adding steals, adding blocks, and his field goal has always been good. He's been averaging around zero point 0.5 per game, which has been very solid. And his free throw won't hurt you. So I think Carmelo Anthony is just another one of those guys that's always been reliable, and he's definitely someone that you can look at picking up. Well, that's enough for me. Nate, let me get to you to hear some of the pickups that you've got this week for NBA.
sure. Uh, for my first pickup, I have Vika Zubac. He's 36% rostered right now. His rank is 77, and he's getting 8.3 points, 6.5 rebounds, and 1 assist. His last game, he played 28 minutes and he got 22 points, 8 rebounds, 1 assist, 1 steal on only 1 turnover with 80% field goal and 100% free throw. So that was a very good game from him.
Mm-hmm.
Um, as you can see, he has a lot of potential upside, especially as a backup center off the bench. So if you're looking for someone off the bench with some good upside, I definitely recommend Zubac. For my next pick, I have Patrick Beverly. He's more of like a deep league pick. Like if you have somebody who's injured and you need someone to pick up off the waiver or something like that, you could probably pick him up. He's officially returned from the injury list, so he should be getting some playing time soon. Currently, his averages are 8.3 points, 4.2 rebounds, and 2.2 assists. And in his last game against Cleveland, he got 16 points, 6 rebounds, 5 assists, and 2 steals on only 1 turnover with 62% field goal and 100% free throws. So, again, a lot of potential upside with him as well. So I would suggest him too, especially in deep leagues. And for my third pick, I've got Daniel House Jr. for the Houston Rockets. Um, he's another deep league pick. He's getting 8.9 points, 3.8 rebounds, and 2.2 assists. He gets a little bit in every category, but he's mostly I guess points and rebounds. He gets some assists as well, like usually around like 2 to 3 assists. and he gets a lot of minutes, so you don't have to worry about him being on the bench and not getting any points for you either. So that's good. So if you're in a deep league and you need another small forward or power forward, you should pick him up as well. And for my last pickup, I've got Lou against Dort. He's averaging 12.1 points, 3.5 rebounds, and 1.4 assists right now. And in his last game, he got 23 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists, and 1 steal. He's currently 30% rostered. So he's on a streak right now. So if you pick him up now, there's a lot of upside with him, especially because he's getting a lot of playing time. So I would suggest that you pick him up since it looks like he's on fire right now. And yeah, those are my pickups for this week.
Yeah, those pickups sound good. It's good that you did cover some deep league pickups because it seemed like mine were more shallow league, close to 50% owned players, and yeah, you covered the deeper end of the spectrum. And then just moving into a general outlook in the NBA. I know you wanted to talk about where some teams are, maybe some trade talks, and I guess just looking at the standings, just sort of the shift that's been going on. I don't know, in terms of the Eastern Conference, do you have anything that you want to talk about in terms of whether it's standings, whether it's trade talk regarding the East?
I think for the most part, there's been a lot of, I guess, trade rumors with Andre Drummond and Blake Griffin. I guess people are just wondering where they'd be going. Um, I'm not particularly sure where they would go or whether they would even be traded, especially with Andre Drummond is still a really decent center. So I guess we'll have to see where they would go. And apparently Blake Griffin he's being held out on the line until he gets traded. So I was just wondering your thoughts on where you'd see these two players going.
I guess just looking at not just a fantasy standpoint, but I guess a team chemistry standpoint. I don't really see them going to, the big three or four teams in the East. If they're going to go somewhere in the East, maybe you look at a team like, if there's a spot available on maybe the Pacers or the Raptors. I think those might be two teams, maybe the Miami Heat if they're really making a playoff push. I think those are the three teams that might be looking to make a trade in the East. I'm not sure what you think in terms of trade partners in the East for those two players.
It's kind of hard to say, especially for the Pacers and Raptors. Pacers because they do have Sabonis and Miles Turner, who are pretty decent for the Pacers, and they may not want to have to give up who they already have, especially because the center doesn't look like their weakest position right now. For the Raptors, the centers are their weakest position, but for Blake Griffin, he's always having injury problems. He's getting a little older, and Andre Drummond, his cap space is kind of a lot. And the other thing that I'm concerned with is free agents tend to not stay. And yes, we are trying to make a playoff push, but at the same time, I feel like it might not be worth it to kind of try to trade your future for what could be a 1 year or 2 year rental kind of thing. So I'm not really too sure about the Pacers or Raptors, but I could kind of see where you're going with it. Probably be a team that wants to try to make a playoff push. They just need maybe one or two pieces, and then they could probably go pretty far.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know if you could see a Blake Griffin on maybe Miami or something like that. Just maybe as an extra piece. I know Atlanta has been slipping lately. I know we can talk about that. They've sort of been on a skid. They've only won two out of their last 10 games. They've really taken a big fall in the East, and Do you think there's anything Atlanta needs to do just to sort of improve and to sort of get back into a playoff spot?
Um, it's kind of hard to say. I'm not sure if adding another player is going to do anything. It could just be a slump because they were on fire earlier in the season. So
Mhm.
maybe they just need to make some adjustments to kind of snap the losing streak that they're in. But I guess we'll kind of see what's going to happen in the future.
Yeah, and speaking of losing streaks, the Milwaukee Bucks have been continuing on their losing streak. They're in a four-game skid right now. They just lost Tuesday night to your Toronto Raptors. What do you think about Milwaukee? And I guess not just Milwaukee, but the East as a whole, seeing that there are a lot of weak teams in the East.
It's definitely not been what I expected. The 76ers are looking like the strongest team in the East right now. And we thought like, especially a couple of years ago, the Bucks were looking like they were the best team in the East pretty much. And they didn't make it out of the playoff conference finals like both times. So it's looking a little bit shaky. I think they can come back. Uh, I don't know how good their seating is going to be, especially with the Nets. Depends on how healthy they are, but we'll see.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess just moving to the West, there's a lot of strong teams. Utah's won nine out of their last 10. They're in first place. Phoenix has also won nine out of their last 10 to be in fourth place. The Lakers have been on a roll as they normally are, 8-2 in their last 10, as well as the Portland Trail Blazers, who have also won eight out of their last 10 and five in a row, as well as the San Antonio Spurs, who are definitely, you know, caught up in the whole COVID thing, as well as many of the other teams, but they're playing well. I guess maybe just looking at some of the teams outside the playoff line right now, a team like Memphis, Dallas, New Orleans, and maybe Houston. Do you see any of those teams getting in, or do you like the teams that are currently in right now?
I think the teams that are in right now, I think it's shaping up to be it'll probably look something like this. With the
Hmm.
Spurs, we'll have to see. Unfortunately, they may drop a couple of spots because of the whole COVID situation. We'll see if they'll be able to finish their games because they did. I think a lot of their games got postponed, so we'll see. Hopefully, they still make the playoffs, but yeah, possibly the Grizzlies or the Mavericks, but I don't think anybody lower than them is going to make it this year.
And just a question for the postponed games: are those games made up, or are the teams like are all those games not going to be made up, and then they just go by winning percentage at the end of the season?
For the postponed games, I'm not entirely sure. I was thinking originally that they try to make it up, but it depends on the time schedule that they have, right? So if the schedule looks like they're not gonna be able to do that, most likely they'll probably just look at winning percentage. So we'll have to see.
Yeah, that makes sense. I could definitely see that happening. And speaking of games, I wanted to take a look at maybe some games that you had for the upcoming week. I know I have some as well that I'm really looking forward to. Maybe if we can start out with the games that you're really looking forward to this week, whether it's fantasy implications, whether it's just general playoff implications. Just go ahead.
Sure. I guess the first game that I think might be notable for Raptors fans and maybe for Bucks fans would be on Thursday. Um, the Raptors are eighth, and the Bucks were two before this game, and now they've dropped to third. It's going to be the tail end of a back to back. The Raptors, they just broke their losing streak, and the Bucks, they've fallen to a fourth game losing streak, and the Raptors are trying their best to stay in the eighth spot or even get a higher seeding, and the Bucks are trying to snap their losing streak. ideally the Bucks would be at least second in the East before the playoffs. So both teams are going to be fighting as hard as they can. And on Friday, I have the Nuggets versus the Cavs. Um, the Nuggets are on a 3-game winning streak, and the Cavs are on an 8-game losing streak. So the Cavs really need to kind of snap the streak. They were doing really well at the start of the season. So I think this is a bit of a disappointment for Cavs fans. But the Nuggets are doing pretty well. They're going to try to do their best to kind of keep their win streak up. So we'll see what the Cavs can do. And on Saturday, we have the Suns versus the Grizzlies. The Suns have a 6-game win streak right now, and the Grizzlies are a 500 team this year. The Grizzlies, they're right outside of the playoffs, so they really need this win to try to make it, and the Suns need this win to get a good seeding. So I think it's going to be a hard fought game as well. And on Sunday, we have the Nets versus the Clippers. Both teams are third in their respective conferences. They're both very high level teams, but they're also both banged up. Uh, Kyrie and Durant are day to day as of right now. So is Kawhi and Batum. Paul George is currently out with an injury, so neither team's going to be at full strength. So it'll be down to whoever's the next man on the roster to try to carry the team forward and get the win. So I think those will be some interesting games.
Yeah, for sure, and definitely. Just to sort of correct you on that, the Raptors have moved up into seventh in the East.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So yeah, so that's kind of how it was shaping up. So it'll be a third place Milwaukee Bucks against a seventh place Toronto Raptors on Thursday. Speaking of Thursday, I have the Brooklyn Nets and the LA Lakers. Like you mentioned, the Nets are very banged up right now, so they are second in the East, but they definitely need to try and get this win against the second place Lakers team, who's also a bit banged up. I know AD's not been playing and if he has been playing, he wasn't playing at 100%. So that game will be interesting just to see which of the two teams are a little more deep and are able to sort of pull out that win. And then just looking at Friday's slate, we got the Utah Jazz against the LA Clippers. You said the Clippers are also banged up, as are most teams in the league right now, and the Utah Jazz are on a roll. So I do expect the Jazz to win this game, but if anyone, whether Kawhi or any others do come back, he'll definitely make this game a lot more interesting. So it's definitely a must-watch game. And then just moving over to the weekend, we've got the Raptors and the 76ers on Sunday, and then they'll be playing a back-to-back on Tuesday. Um, like you mentioned, big playoff implications for the Raptors. The Sixers are trying to stay on a roll as they've been very hot as of late, being the number one team in the East. And as you mentioned, the Raptors just continuing to sort of make that climb back to where we normally see them every year in the Eastern Conference. And then just moving on to Portland against Denver. You did mention Denver a little bit, being a team that's been a little bit better as of late. They are 3 games above 500, and then a Portland team who's won 5 in a row. So it's just pretty much two heavyweights from the West clashing. You got Damian Lillard, who's just been playing out of his mind, as well as Nikola Jokic, who's also been playing out of his mind. So two solid potential MVP level candidates facing off against each other on Tuesday. Just makes for some great basketball. I think you can probably agree with that.
Yeah, for sure. Especially Blazers versus Nuggets.
Yeah, just two solid teams overall. It'll be a great game to watch. And thanks once again for listening to the NBA portion of the Fantasy Fanatics podcast. We'll now move into some hockey talk, where we'll talk about some NHL pickups, as well as a special segment this week. We'll be talking about the goalie tandems to own in the NHL for fantasy. So let's just move over to the hockey segment.
Welcome back to the hockey segment of the Fantasy Fanatics Podcast. I'm your host, Nathan, and we're here with our hockey expert, James Kumar.
Hey, what's up, man?
So today we're gonna go through some hockey pickups, some goalie tandems that you should, I guess we would consider the top 10, and some upcoming games.
Yeah, for sure. Let's hop into it.
All right. So, what are some pickups that you're thinking about right now?
Okay, so I'll start with forwards. I did mention him last week before he ended up on the COVID list. He's now off, and that's Jesse Puljujärvi, only 20% owned in leagues. He is still playing on that top line with Connor McDavid and Ryan Nugent-Hopkins in Edmonton. And he's just been averaging close to 5 shots every game, which is really good. He's also been averaging around 3 hits per game in his last 4. So that's pretty impressive as well. His plus minus it evens out, and he doesn't get as much power play time, but definitely there's room for the production because he is playing close to 20 minutes per game at right wing. So if you're short of right wings and you're looking for a guy with maybe a little bit of upside, if you want to plug him in for like one night and a guy that might explode, I think he's definitely the right kind of guy to pick up. The next guy, once again, is Jordan Stahl. I'm surprised he's only under 50% owned in Yahoo leagues. I know he's been picked up around 15% in the last week. He's just been fantastic. In his last 3 games, he has 4 goals. He's a +1. He has 1 assist. He has 3 power play points in his last 3 games. He's averaging around 2 shots per game, around 2 hits per game. He's just solid all the way across the board. If you're in face-offs leagues, I believe he's above 50% in face-offs as well. So he's pretty much addable in every league. The only down point is that he's center eligible only. So if you have a lot of centers on your team, that might be a reason why you don't pick him up. But I guess if you have injuries, he should be the top center taken off the waiver, just depending on his availability. And he's playing around 20 minutes a game. I see the average is around 19 something, so you should be good in that aspect as well. And then just looking at another guy, Jack Roslovic, he's only about 45% owned in Yahoo leagues, center right wing eligible, so that's really good. Ever since he got to Columbus in the trade, he's just been on fire. He's putting up pretty much a point per game. He might even be better than that. His stats on the season have just been fantastic. He has 4 goals, 6 assists. He's a +2. He's got 3 power play points, 17 shots, 6 hits. I mean, he's just been doing pretty much everything. I believe he's only played around 10 games. So for him to have that many points for a guy that hasn't really produced at that level is really solid. I mean, they got him centering the top line of Patrick Laine and Cam Atkinson in Columbus. So, I mean, for a top line guy, I mean, he definitely should be picked up for his production. And then just again, looking at Carter Verhaeghe, we talk about him almost every week. He just keeps producing every week, and people don't want to pick him up. He's 29% owned. We started talking about him when he was 2% owned, and now he's 29% owned, and people still don't want to pick him up. I don't know why. Verhaeghe's been amazing. He had 2 assists in his last game. He's averaging around 4 shots a game, around 2 hits a game. In his last 3 games, he's been a +1. So he's just been solid overall. He's playing on the top line with Barkov and Duclair in Florida. And I mean, he's definitely someone that needs to be picked up. I mean, we can't stress it enough. I'm even in leagues where he's not picked up, and I don't know why. It might be deep teams or whatever, but he's definitely someone to look at for sure. And then I think that wraps it up for forwards for me. What about for you?
Yeah, well, first of all, maybe we should have some kind of like celebration thing whenever Higgy becomes over 50% owned.
Yeah, I guess it's something we can keep track of every week because clearly people don't want to pick him up. His production's been great. He's definitely someone that you can toss into your lineup. And I mean, people don't believe us. We were calling out this guy when he was 2% owned, man. Let's just keep chugging that train all the way to 50%. So we don't need
All
to
right.
talk about him anymore.
Verhage 50%. Guys got to pick him up so we don't have to talk about him anymore.
Hashtag Verhage 50.
All right. So I've got a couple of forwards. Some of them we have talked about before as well. But the first one is new. Evgeny Dadonov. He's about 32% rostered right now. Um, he's has 6 goals, 2 assists, and he's -4, and he has 37 shots on goal. He did have that crazy game against Toronto where they came back from being down 5-1 and they won somehow.
Can't believe it, man. Can't believe it.
That he had 2 goals
Do
that
better,
game and he was
Toronto. Do
+2.
better, Toronto.
Well, I mean, Senator fans are really happy right now.
I mean,
And
they haven't had much to be happy about this year, to be fair. So I guess we'll give them
yeah,
one.
we got to give them this one.
Yeah.
And we got to give Evgeny Dadonov the green light to be picked up because he has 2 goals and he's +2 and he has 3 shots on goal. And if he did this once against Toronto, might be able to do this against other teams as well. So we'll have to see.
Mhm.
And the next pickup I have is Pajot for the New York Islanders. He's 26% rostered right now. And he so far has 5 goals, 3 assists. He's +3 and he has 25 shots on goal. So he's a really good all around center. If you're short on centers, you should definitely pick him up, and he should be able to fill in multiple categories for you. His last game, he had 1 goal, 1 assist. He was +2, and he had 2 shots on goal and 2 hits. So
Oh, that's
very,
fantastic.
yeah, very good all around game from Pajot. Um, he's +12 last day, so it looks like a lot of people have noticed his production. So especially if you're in a deep league, you might want to pick him up now before it's too late.
Hmm.
And for my third forward, I have Nick Schmaltz for the Arizona Coyotes. I think we did mention him before. So far, he's 29% rostered. He's ranked 79 right now, and he has 6 goals, 7 assists. He's +3, and he has 37 shots on goal. So that's very decent this year. His last game wasn't his best, but he did have 3 shots on goal and 1 hit. He was -1 because the team did lose, but I think considering um, the I guess the score and his plus minus, I still think that's very decent. He should be able to get a good production for you, and he can be a center or a right wing. So if you're short on either of those, you should pick him up. And my last forward is Joel Farabee for the Philadelphia Flyers. Um, he's good for a left wing and right wing, so dual eligibility. That's always good. And he has 6 goals, 6 assists. He's +6, and he has 28 shots on goal. So if you're really down on plus minus, you should pick up Joel Farabee. He should be able to offset your plus minus for you. And those are my forwards so far. And for defense, who do you have?
Yeah, I know like we've been mentioning some of the same people every week, but I mean we got Connor Garland up to what, like almost 70% now. I think we
All
started
right.
mentioning him when he was like 20%. We had that episode where we talked about a lot of Arizona players
Oh
to pick
yeah,
up. And then I think he was like 20% or something. And now he's ranked 34 and he's up to almost 70%. So like,
all right.
we can get these guys up
Congratulations.
there. We got to get Verhage up there. He's got to keep playing though. So Verhage, if you're listening, keep going, man. We're trying to get you up to 50% in Yahoo leagues.
Exactly. Verhage 50. Let's go.
Let's go. Hashtag Verhage 50. Uh, I'll get to defensemen now, and I'll start with Bowen Byram for the Colorado Avalanche, and with defenseman Kale McCarr. missing some games. Byram stepped into the top pairing. I know we talked about him after the World Juniors. We talked about him in one of the pickup episodes. So it seems like now is the right time to pick him up. I know he didn't start off that well offensively, but in terms of plus minus, he's been solid. He's been getting 15 shots on goal on the season for a defenseman that didn't even start the season right away. He started halfway, like partway through. 15 shots is quite a lot. And he had 5 hits in his last game. So, I mean, he's just been solid. He's definitely a guy that could explode at any moment because he has that offensive talent. So Byram's definitely someone to add as he's under 10% owned as of right now. And just another defenseman. I don't remember if I mentioned him last week, but it was Evan Bouchard of the Edmonton Oilers, rookie defenseman. In his last game, he had 2 assists and he had 8 shots. That's crazy for a defenseman. Defensemen normally don't shoot that much, and his plus minus has just been down the middle. He doesn't get too much power play time, but if you're looking for maybe a lot of shots, I mean, he'll get some hits, and then he'll produce some points as well. So he's definitely another deep league guy. Under 10% owned. If you're really short on defense, you want to take like a dart throw on a guy. Evan Bouchard might be the kind of guy that you'd be looking for. And just another guy is Radko Gudas. I know we mentioned him last time. This guy's insane. In the last week, he's had 25 hits. That's just unreal. And let me just read this out to you. In his last few games, the hit total. So you got 8 hits, 6 hits, 5 hits, 6, 6, 9, 10, 5.
That's
Those are
crazy.
those are single game totals. If you need to win hits, if your team is losing hits every week and this guy's on the waiver, you need to pick him up. He's only 20% owned in Yahoo. He's just been added 2% in the last week. That's not enough. Gudis needs to be owned in every league that counts hits. Every league that counts hits, if you're a 12-team league or a 10-team league, if Gudis isn't owned, I don't know what you're doing. You're just throwing away hits every week. This guy is insane. His plus minus has been solid. Like all of his other categories have been solid. For the season, he's a +7. He has like 2 or 3 assists on the season. He's not much of a point producer. I mean, he'll shoot the puck. He's got 18 shots on the season. So you're getting good plus minus, you're getting shots on goal, and you're getting a boatload of hits. So he just seems like a logical option to pick up on defense. And those are the guys I have.
Wow, those are some crazy hits.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I own him in a league, and I can't lose hits again. Like I lost, I think 1 week in the season, picked him up. After that, haven't lost a week in hits. So if you got to make the sacrifice. If there's a guy that's not producing, I don't know. Just I know some people were dropping Rasmus Dahlin. I don't advise you to be dropping him. He's a top level defenseman. I know some people were frustrated, but maybe if you got someone like Ekholm from Nashville who's been injured, and you might want to drop him for someone like Gudis, I definitely recommend that because Gudis is definitely worth it.
Yeah. So hopefully Gudis makes it to 50% because we don't want to be having to mention Verhage and Gudis every week.
Well, here's the thing. What I notice about a lot of people in terms of pickups, they just look at points. That might be because certain leagues only count points, but if he goes on like a streak where maybe like 2 or 3 straight games he'll have like an assist or maybe he'll get a goal or whatever, I know that people will take notice of the hits also, and his value will just skyrocket as well as his ownership. So that's definitely something to look out for.
Yeah. So again, if you're in a league that counts hits, please pick up Gudis so we don't have to talk about him again.
Oh, we'll probably just end up talking about him because people aren't gonna pick him up. Like we've been talking about Verhage for weeks, and Nick Schmalz. We've been talking about him. We've been talking about Farabee. These guys still aren't getting picked up. So I think he might be on our list for a couple of weeks more. We'll have to see.
All right. And we'll go to, I guess, goalie tandems now. So as a goalie, what do you see in these goalie tandems?
Um, Before I get to goalie tandems, I just want to talk about a few pickups. Um, yeah, we'll go to Capo Kakinen. I will mention him a bit later, but Cam Talbot's been a little banged up. I don't know whether he's on the COVID list or what's going on with him. So Minnesota needs a starting goalie, and Kakinen's going to be that guy until Talbot gets back. It's only 18% owned right now in Yahoo leagues as we record, so he's definitely a must add. I'll also cover Cal Peterson of the LA Kings. He's only around 20% owned in Yahoo leagues. Been putting up solid stats for being on a sort of a bottom team. His averages have just been solid. He's got a goals against average of about 250, which is solid on a low team. And his save percentage has also been very solid. He's been putting up a 926 save percentage. And we know LA, they're not most likely not going to make the playoffs. But yeah, you can still get value out of him. I know he only has 2 wins on the season so far, and that's kind of concerning. But if you have guys that can produce wins for you, like if you have like a Vasilevsky, and maybe you have like I don't know, a Sergei Bobrovsky, but yeah, you need to sort of balance that out, get some better averages. Peterson's definitely someone to add.
Sounds good. I've got a couple of guys. I think one of them we mentioned before. So again, Jake Allen. He's ranked 57 right now, and he has 4 wins, and his save percent is 93. He's had some drops, but I don't think he should be under 45% rostered. He's 47% rostered now. I think it should be a little bit higher, but we'll see what's gonna happen. And I also have Mike Smith. He's 41% rostered. He's ranked 67. He has 2 wins, and he has a 93.5 save percentage. So again, those are two very solid goalies, especially if you need somebody off the waiver wire in a shallow league, you should probably pick them up. And yeah, hopefully we have a lot of people we keep mentioning every week. So yeah, hopefully you guys pick them up so we don't have to mention them again. But
Yeah, I know. I mean, I even see these guys available in the leagues I play in, and I thought the people I play with are pretty confident. So I guess some people just aren't seeing the value in these players. But yeah, over the next few weeks, we'll definitely have to see.
right, for sure. So now that we've done our goalie pickups, we'll talk about goalie tandems. And I guess just who are your goalie tandems, and what are kind of the traits? What are kind of like the value that you see in these guys?
Okay, so just sort of an overview on this whole thing. We're doing a goalie tandem segment because I know that people have been struggling with injuries, especially to goalies. People complaining that there aren't good goalies on their waiver wire. So, in terms of goalie tandems, what we're trying to say is not including the tandems that are injured, like Peter Mrazek and James Reimer. We know Mrazek's out. We know with Grubauer and Francouz has been out with an injury. Those are just examples of tandems where the guys aren't healthy. These are healthy tandems that I believe that both goalies should be owned in standard 12 team category leagues. And yeah, the reason we're mentioning this is because some people ask which backups are safe to own, which backups will give me value. So I guess we'll just talk about that. I'll definitely start with Cam Talbot and Capo Kakinen. I know Talbot, he's been on and off the COVID list. He should be okay coming up, but him and Kakinen for Minnesota, they've just been solid. And Minnesota is usually a tightly knit defensive team, so their stats probably won't hurt you. And it seems like they are going to be sort of splitting the starts going forward. So I think you'll get value from both goalies in fantasy. And then I know you just talked about Mike Smith, him and Mikko Koskinen. I know the Oilers are sort of getting back to sort of the way they need to play defensively. And I think with Mike Smith being back from injury, it should help them. Both goalies should get you some value. I think maybe more on the win side rather than averages. Their save percentages might be pretty good, but their goals against average, I'm not 100% sure because the North has been high scoring. So you'll definitely have to keep an eye on that. And then for the Dallas Stars, in as my eighth tandem, I've got Anton Hudobin and Jake Ottinger. And I know there was some issues with Hudobin. They seem to be resolved now with the coaching staff there in Dallas, but Ottinger filled in pretty well for him. I know the wins haven't always been coming, but definitely those two goalies are solid enough, and they'll get you solid stats in fantasy. And then looking at the Philadelphia Flyers, we got Carter Hart and his backup Brian Elliott. I know when Hart struggled a little bit, Elliott came in there, stabilized the net. He seems to be a very solid backup goalie, so he's definitely someone that should be owned. His start percentage might not be as high as other backups, but when he does start, most of the starts are pretty good. Um, and then for the Florida Panthers, Sergei Bobrovsky and Chris Drieger. And Drieger was, he didn't play as much at the beginning, but now he's starting to get a few more starts because Bobrovsky struggled a little bit. Um, they're on a very good Florida team this year, a surprisingly good Florida team this year. I don't think many of us expected them to be close to Tampa Bay in the standings. They're both getting wins. I mean, their averages, some good games, some bad games, but they're getting wins, and that's always important. And Drieger's the kind of guy you pick him up, you insert him into your lineup. There's a good chance he's going to get you a win. So definitely, he's a good goalie to own as well. Now for my top five, these guys are must own goalies, both the starter and the backup. We'll start with Jonas Korpisalo and Elvis Merzlikins from Columbus. The team is sort of getting their chemistry back together. I know the goalies have been a little shaky as of late, but definitely as this team gets their chemistry back, these two goalies will be a big part of their success. So I believe they both should be owned as they should be splitting starts. And then moving to the Washington Capitals, Ilya Samsonov and Vitek Vanacek. I know Vanacek was sort of manning the net while Samsonov was out with the COVID protocol. I know Washington sort of struggled with the whole COVID situation with their team, but now that they're back, I believe that both goalies will be solid and they'll be used. And I believe that Washington will be one of the top teams in the East Division. And then just looking at the Montreal Canadiens, their starter Carey Price, and I know you talked about their backup Jake Allen. Both goalies have been solid. They've been getting wins while they've been in the net. Jake Allen, he'll get maybe around one start a week. I've noticed, maybe more than that, but he's been solid in all those starts. So I believe both goalies should be owned. Allen just for his percentages and so on, and then Carey Price just because he's just one of the better goalies in the league. And then for number two, I'll look at the Boston Bruins. I have Tuukka Rask and Yaroslav Halak. Halak's also getting around one start per week. The Bruins are one of the hottest teams in the league. They're winning. They're playing defense. I believe even Halak got a shutout this past week, so he's playing solid hockey. Tuukka Rask is playing solid hockey as well. So those two guys definitely are must own. And the number one tandem, which should be to the surprise of no one, is Marc-Andre Fleury and Robin Lehner from the Vegas Golden Knights. I know Lehner's been banged up as of late, so Fleury's been getting a lot of the starts, but they are more of a 50-50 split when they are both healthy. And Vegas, they're in first place in the West right now. They've been playing solid. And Marc-Andre Fleury, I mean, just on Sunday, he shut out the Colorado Avalanche, who's one of the best offensive teams in the league. So he's been solid. Lehner's been getting wins. I know he's been a little shaky in a couple starts, but there's no reason to drop either of these two goalies. They're both must own as they're definitely a high win percentage whenever they're in the net for the Golden Knights. And yeah, that was just a little segment that I have for you guys. Just some goalies that can be picked up. I know definitely some leagues, the teams are owning like three or four goalies, so the waivers pretty much milk dry for goalies. So these are just some sort of guys. You might see them on the waiver. Should I pick them up? Maybe just pull the trigger on some of these guys. They might get starts, and they also might perform well for you.
Yeah, that sounds good. It's been a little bit tough trying to find, I guess, like who's the right goalie for you, but I think you've given like a really comprehensive list, especially if you need like a backup goalie. Most of these like backup goalies, you should just be able to put them on your roster and they'll be able to put in work for you.
Yeah, for sure. Like if you got a goalie from a team that's maybe allowing a lot of goals, like maybe you got a goalie from Buffalo, maybe from Vancouver, maybe from San Jose. Some of those teams are allowing a lot of goals right now, and you're sort of frustrated. Maybe look at some of these backups that we've just mentioned, and maybe take a flyer on one of them, and they should turn out for you.
Sounds good. And speaking of which, we're going to, I guess, move on to I guess the NHL, I guess just general standing and kind of games. So I guess before we go into games, I was just wondering on your general thoughts on the current landscape of the NHL.
Yeah, starting with the North Division, I know we all know what happened to the Leafs on Tuesday night. I don't think we need to talk about that anymore. As a Leafs fan, I was disappointed, but I think it's a wake up call that Toronto needed to sort of get back on track. Back to back losses is not good, of course, but sometimes it takes that just to sort of fix whatever issues might be going on with the team. And then just overall, that division is very close. I mean, between second place Montreal and sixth place Vancouver, it's like a 5 point spread as of the time we're recording. So it's very tight. This division can go either way, and I guess just looking at the East Division, Boston's just been on a roll. And then you sort of got the New York Islanders, and then you got Philly, Washington, Pittsburgh sort of mixed in there. And then you sort of have the bottom three teams after that. And then out west, Vegas has been playing well. St. Louis has been playing well. Colorado's just getting back from COVID, but they were playing well. Arizona's definitely turned things around. Minnesota's been playing well. And, like all the teams in there, maybe the teams from California might not be playing as well, but there seems to be some good games from the West. They've been tight games. They've been good games. So definitely some great games out west, and tight division for sure. And then just back to the Central, Tampa Bay playing well. I know they did drop a couple recently to Florida, who is behind them in that division. You also got Carolina, who's been playing really well. They have a 4-0 home record this year, so they've been unbeatable at home as of late. And then you sort of got Chicago, Columbus, Dallas mixing it in there. And then Nashville and Detroit sort of rounding out the bottom of that division. So that division looks very interesting around the middle. So we'll definitely see how that shapes out. I don't know if you have any thoughts regarding that.
Um, it's looking like an interesting season for sure. Um, Although I guess for a lot of the league, it looks like the teams that you would expect to be at the top are there. Like the Bruins are at the top. I think we usually expect the Bruins to be somewhere close to the top.
Yeah, for
Tampa
sure.
Bay is at the top. The Golden Knights are at the top. Blues are
Hmm.
near the top. The Leafs too, I guess every Leaf fan's happiness is at the top. So I know they did take a loss,
We don't
but they're
deserve to be
still
at the top.
well, hopefully they'll be able to kind of turn something around and like earn their first place spot again. I think the Leafs they're not just at the top of their division, but they're at the top of like pretty much all teams. They have 24 points right now. I think that's the highest amount of points in the entire league right now.
Hmm.
So that's I still think like even though it's like kind of a hard loss, sometimes you just have to kind of, I guess, try to find a silver lining. At least you know the Leafs are kind of ahead, and they might have lost two, but they're still 4 points ahead of the second place team, the Canadians.
Hmm.
So you don't want to burn that lead away. Um, Ideally, you'd be able to kind of snap that streak, but they're not in a position where, okay, they need to kind of scramble and do something. Otherwise, they're out of a playoff spot. They're not there yet. So,
Yeah, for sure. I think I can agree with that. I know they got a couple games coming up against Ottawa. They got, a few more games down the road against some of the other teams in the division. So they just need to keep doing what they were doing earlier in the year, and they'll get some wins.
yeah. Like sometimes teams just like go on a slump. It does happen. Um, like this was a very unexpected loss, but upsets do happen. It's just kind of how the game works, especially nowadays.
Hmm.
So uh I guess the Leafs, they should be able to kind of pull themselves together and get some more wins. So I wouldn't say this is indicative of like anything serious at this point.
Yeah, I'd say the same thing. It was just more of a wake up call, if anything.
Yeah, for sure. And so I guess we'll move on to some upcoming games. And what are some upcoming games that you think people should look out for?
Okay, so we'll start with Thursday. We got Dallas against Tampa Bay. I know these two teams were scheduled to meet at the beginning of the season. It was supposed to be the big Stanley Cup Finals rematch, but those games ended up getting postponed. So they're finally going to be meeting on Thursday, which is going to be a big game for these two teams. Dallas looking to turn around a losing streak, and Tampa Bay to sort of just maintain at the top. And of course, it is a Stanley Cup Finals rematch, so everyone is going to be looking forward to it. So that's what I got for Thursday. And then both Friday and Saturday, we've got Edmonton against Calgary, the Battle of Alberta. Everyone loves these games. They're usually high scoring, a lot of hitting, usually some fights. These two teams just really don't like each other. So it makes for some exciting hockey. Both teams are also playing pretty well. So I think we should see two solid games back to back between the two teams. And then I'll look at the two outdoor games. Actually, we got two games that will be played at Lake Tahoe. They've got a rink set up there on the golf course. On Saturday, they'll have Vegas against Colorado at Lake Tahoe. So that's going to be fantastic. Two of the top teams in the West facing off against each other outdoors. And then on Sunday, we got Philadelphia against Boston, also at Lake Tahoe. So, um, again, two of the top teams in the East. So fantastic matchups we're looking at. We're looking at two solid games. I know there won't be fans outdoors, but Lake Tahoe is known for the scenery, the mountains in the background and so on. So and of course everyone loves outdoor hockey because it's where the sport was born. So it's definitely something to look forward to if you're looking for some games to watch on the weekend.
That sounds like some good games, especially the Lake Tahoe game and Battle of Alberta 2 and 3.
Yeah, it's gonna be wild. Let me just tell you that.
I know the people in Alberta, they're going to be watching that for sure.
Yeah, I mean, we know how much Edmonton fans hate Matthew Kachuk, and we know how much Calgary fans hate Zach Cassian. So, because we'll see what happens. Those two will probably drop the gloves at some point. We're just curious to know when.
Yeah, I guess this is probably one of the good times that there aren't like fans around because probably somebody might try to start something and that's not too good. So that's like the one time it's good to not have fans in the stands right now.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. So I guess I've got a few games that people might want to check out. Um, on Friday, I have the New York Islanders versus the Penguins. Um, the Islanders were trying to get into a playoff spot, but they just came off a win. They're on a 3-game win streak right now, and they're second in the East Division. So they're doing really well right now. And the Penguins, they're about 4 games behind, but we'll see if they can come back from behind and try to kind of snap their losing streak. It's just a 1-game losing streak right now, but hopefully they'll be able to turn that losing streak into a win streak. And the Saturday game, there's a game against the LA Kings versus the Coyotes. The Coyotes are 4 points behind the Blues in a playoff spot right now. And the Coyotes right now have a 1-game win streak. So we'll see if they can kind of turn that 1-game win streak into a 2-game win streak. The Kings, they're really far behind. It doesn't really look like they're going to be making the playoffs, but uh, regardless, I think that the Kings are going to try their best to kind of try to try to see what they can do in the division right now. They're on a 1-game win streak, so I still think they're gonna try to play a hard game, try to spoil things for the Coyotes, see what they can
Mm-hmm.
do.
Mm-hmm.
And on Sunday, there is a game. Actually, I have another game on Saturday, and that's the Chicago Blackhawks versus the Hurricanes. They're both third and fourth in their division, so it's going to be a tight game. Both teams are on a win streak right now. Chicago is on a 2-game win streak. Hurricanes are on a 3-game win streak. They both want that second spot. So basically, whoever wins this, it they may or may not um, pull ahead. I think they both have 20 points right now, actually. So whoever wins this, and depending on how well the Panthers do, you might see one of these teams in a playoff spot right now. So Central Division is really close right now, so we'll see what's going to happen. And on Sunday, we have the Canadians versus the Senators. The Senators are in a 2-game win streak right now. They're also kind of in a similar situation to the Kings. They're really behind, and every other team has pulled so far ahead. It's gonna be tough to kind of see them making a playoff run at this point. It's probably not gonna happen, but that doesn't mean that the Senators are just gonna sit down and just not try to win. They're gonna see
Hmm.
what they can do against every other team. If there's a chance to kind of spoil things for other teams, they're gonna try to do that. Try to make some other teams look foolish,
Just like the Leafs.
just like they did to the
I knew
Leafs.
you were
So,
leading up to that. I could feel that coming. Yeah.
so this is basically the best time for the Senators right now, outside of being in a playoff spot. See who they can look foolish, see who they can spoil games for. Basically, they have nothing to lose at this point, so they might as well just go as hard as they can in any team. So
Yeah,
I
like
think,
they just been beating, like I think they've beaten the top three teams in the North right now. They've beaten Toronto twice, they've beaten Montreal, and they've beaten Winnipeg. So I mean they are already spoiling it for people. So
that's pretty much it. Like at this point, maybe there's no playoff spot for them, but it's kind of funny to see people say, "Hey, you lost to the worst team in the division." That's kind of funny. So they're probably going
yeah,
to keep doing that.
I guess winning people that believe in them a lot of money. Clearly,
Yeah, and anybody who lives in Ottawa, they're going to be really happy too.
yeah, for sure.
So I guess those are pretty much the games that I have, and I guess I was just wondering if you have any extra thoughts on the Senators right now.
Um, I guess just in general for the Senators, they just got to take everything one game at a time. They can't look ahead. Where they're at. They dug themselves a deep hole, so they'll just take one win at a time to sort of get out of that hole. And speaking of digging their way out of a hole, I've pretty much buried pretty much everyone in our fantasy fanatics hockey pool. It's now as we're speaking, a 23-point lead that I have on the second place person. And all of you guys got to dig out of a hole, or else you'll just be hearing me talk more when it comes time for the hockey pool interview. And yeah, I shouldn't be the one talking. It should be one of you. I know my reputation is on the line, as we've been talking about, but I mean, I would definitely like to congratulate someone. So you guys got work to do. You got to catch up.
So I guess just as a matter of interest, which viewer is kind of the closest to catching up?
Oh, geez. I guess from people not doing the podcast, we got Jonathan's team, Phil Kessel, and there's a few others underneath there, but those are sort of the top end guys that aren't from the podcast. So um, they are still in a deep hole, but we'll see what happens.
Well, those two teams, you've got your work cut out for you. Basically, the entire pool has their work cut out for them.
Pretty
So,
much.
but this is kind of why he's the hockey expert. So, I mean,
What can I say, right?
yeah. So hopefully one of you guys can catch up, kind of make it things more interesting instead of every week we see James ahead by 20 points.
I mean, my name says it. I should be planning the parade at this point because it looks like I'm gonna end up winning this pool.
It looks like he's planning the parade already. So if you guys want to I guess, try to see if you can rain on it, now's the time.
Yeah, let's see if some people can catch up. Hopefully, it'll be a lot closer than next week, but we'll see.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess tune in next week. We'll give you some more pickups, and we'll look at some more upcoming games, and then we'll talk about the league a little bit more and see how things are shaping up.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, that concludes the hockey segment for the Fantasy Fanatics podcast.